All right, so this is a Carter 9605S. I want to put together a quick video on this just because, whenever I have a hard time finding seemingly basic information on stuff, I'm usually inspired to try and throw together a video with what I found, so, maybe it's easier on the next person. So I want to make this video on this. You might be in a situation where you can find one of these Carter carburetors for fairly cheap, or you take it off something else and maybe you want to rebuild it for another project that you have, and that's kind of the situation that I found myself in. I had this on the 1923 T-Bucket that I have, but it of course had a different engine. It was a small block Chevy, and the person who I bought it from immediately was saying, you're gonna have to change the carburetor because it's having all kinds of issues. So rather than fiddling with it at the time, we just pulled it off and bought an Edelbrock. Now the comparable Edelbrock to this is the 1405. And that's just the manual choke version. 1406 would be, the electric choke. But essentially this is a 600 CFM Carter, which, naturally has basically the same internals and specifications and parts as an Edelbrock because they bought the design. So what I wanted to do was eventually, when I was sitting around with this, I wanted to try and figure out what the issue might be, and then eventually gear it up to another project, which in turn came with this. So recently purchased 1979 Z28. What this came with is a Quadrajet, and I'll show you that here in a bit. Quadrajet, honestly, it seems overly complicated to me. Maybe, you're in love with the Quadrajet and it's, helped get you through some tough times at some point, but I don't know. When I took it apart, it just seemed way too overly complicated. It doesn't really seem like anyone is even rebuilding those or doing much with them at all. So mostly you just hear about Holleys, Edelbrocks, and I'm sure there's others that people commit themselves to. But I figured it was a really easy thing to just kind of switch to, more of like an Edelbrock style carburetor, because that's just what I'm most used to. A lot of people are super diehard Holley fans, and I'm sure there's plenty of bias either direction. But that's basically just the inspiration for this change. So what became the most complicated part, other than discovering the minor issues with this, is really just figuring out the specs that I needed. A lot of people, when I was asking, or going to forums rather, and looking at what kind of tuning people were doing for a similar situation to me, and the number one answer that I kept seeing on these forums to these people, asking very logical questions and just looking for a little bit more detail, and they're like, oh, don't worry about it, whatever the Edelbrock comes with is the best. And it's like, in a situation that I have where I have a Carter that I'm trying to get to the point where an out-of-the-box Edelbrock would be, that's not helpful to know everything that is on the Edelbrock is peachy. So luckily enough, because I buy so many Edelbrocks, I of course saved one of the manuals, and I'll go over this in a little bit. But that was kind of the main inspiration. Now, going through a quick rundown, if you have one of these, you probably have identified what it looks like. But if this is the first time that you're seeing it all open like this, it's fairly straightforward, honestly. Again, I'll probably show you towards the end of the video. If you're just looking for basic information, I don't want to take up too much time at the front end, but I'll probably show you the Quadrajet just to show how ridiculously overcomplicated they made it. But this is one piece takeoff, and you get exposure to both the bowls and everything. You could take off really all of these bits. When you get a rebuild kit, you have the gaskets under each of these, and it just makes it really straightforward. You can replace your spring and squirter. Now, the number one thing I noticed being wrong with this is it looks like that squirter has all kinds of like chips and holes. You might through the video think that, you know, it's like debris or something, but if I hit it at the right angle, you can see that they're genuine cavities. And I don't know if they go all the way through, but if they do, then I would imagine that's a serious issue. Now, this is a 0.028 millimeter squirter. For whatever reason, I cannot find a comparable to this. I'm sure somewhere deep down in the web you can actually find it, but at least offhand, I was not able to find a comparable squirter. I had to buy a pack. The pack came with like a 24, a 31, and then like a 34. And so I'm just going to basically make do with a 31 and call it an upgrade. But that was kind of the first thing I identified was being fairly difficult. But the 28 on this currently is the perfect application for if I want to just have this as a 600 CFM for the use that I'm trying to get out of it. So I did find it interesting that, and you'll see on this, that so many call for a 28, diameter nozzle, and they're just so hard to find. So that is your first introductory look, but let me grab some other things real quick. So let's say you go to a swap meet or a car show, or like you're in my situation where you bought a car that you want to upgrade and you just want to kind of play around with the previous carburetor, or there's an issue with it and you want to identify. I would honestly just buy one of those rebuild kits. It's super straightforward. I think early on a couple of my vehicles, I literally took it to like a shop and had it done. And if you're in kind of a pinch or a bind or something like that, maybe it's worth it. Or you're just nervous about what could happen if you misplace something wrong. But honestly, the rebuild kit was so straightforward and so simple that I think anyone could do it. If you're just careful, if you're detailed, if you set aside everything, like you can see, I replaced the screws exactly where I got them from once the top is off, so I'm not gonna lose any of these or anything like that. But rebuild kit basically replaces all these gaskets that are underneath these nozzles and atomizers and stuff like that, and underneath the squirter. And the most helpful thing on it was the diagram, because as I'm taking it apart, I'm trying to identify what might have been the issue other than the issue that I identified with the squirter. I was able to find that the little tiny ball right there that goes under that kind of like square peg, and that's under the squirter, was missing. And so, because these are so interchangeable and it's the exact same design, a chart like this was almost worth the money of the rebuild kit in itself. I definitely found some mesh filters that weren't really good anymore, and the float levels were bad. So I wasn't upset with taking it apart and going through it, but the chart in itself was super helpful, and taking apart everything and just making sure everything I needed was there. So that's kind of key number one, is buy that rebuild kit. You can start slapping together your Carter with all these pieces and just making sure that you have the right items. But you can find this online, or you can pause the video there, and that should be helpful. Now the next important part is going to be this chart. Now this comes with your carburetor, Edelbrock, it's your installation instructions. So if you buy an Edelbrock, then you're going to have this already. If you bought one, save this, because it'll come in handy for situations like this. The other thing I'll note is, honestly, you can find this online. They do little samples, like you could purchase it, but then they pretty much give you a sample of the entire book. And so, you can download what you need out of it. So this gives you all the information you need. And again, this is going to be interchangeable with the Carter. And so the most important thing that you're going to have to do is, using the number right here, this 9605, you can identify what comparable part number that is. So if this had an electric choke on it, then like I said, it's going to be a 1406, but because it has the manual choke, it's going to be the 1405. Now, from that information, I know now that it's a 600 CFM, which is the application that I need for my Z28. And then going down the line, you can see your primary main jet size 0.100, and your main jet secondary 0.095. You got your metering rod sizes, step up spring, float height, and everything else. Middle hole for your pump drive link. You know, you can make it a little bit more racier by doing the top hole, and it should be fine. But basically, this is going to be your baseline. This is what out of the box your Edelbrock is going to come with, the information that apparently was really hard to convey over a forum. So another thing to note, again, accelerator pump nozzle diameter, 28, 28, 28, 31, 35, 28, 35, 35, 35, 35, 28, 28, like 28. Tons of 28s, but for whatever reason, such a hard part to find. I ended up buying the pack on Amazon, and it was the last one. And then they sell it on jigs as well. But I don't know, you might not be having this issue. Maybe you found some other site that has tons of them, but that's just my experience from there. So keep that in mind, that some of those parts aren't going to be as easy. The other thing to note is getting your individual jets and metering rods. Normally they'll sell them in packs, and you spend $50 to $70 on getting a pack with, I don't know, 50 different variations or more of what you do with your carburetor, and you're only ever going to use like 3 different jet sizes at most, and maybe 2 different metering rods at most. So that was kind of annoying, and I'm sure you've experienced that as well if you've ever worked with any carburetors. But basically, I was able to buy packs of the specific jets I need and the specific metering rods, and then a spring pack. So I have adjustability with the springs. I have adjustability with the squirters. So when I'm flooring it, I can get more power there. But basically, I'm just taking it to stock. So the main issues I had in removing the jets were because Carter's, I think the guy invented essentially this design in like 1957, and it was very popular in the 60s. So if you're buying a Carter, you're probably getting, something that was made in like the 60s or so. Obviously it went on, I think, till 85, till he closed his doors, but I don't even know the entire life cycle of the carburetors, how long they were making them, and at what point Edelbrock bought it. I'm sure that's all history that you could find yourself. But just keep that in mind, that a lot of this stuff is going to be super old. So here are the jets, and the right side of the carburetor weren't so bad. Like this one actually maintained its shape pretty well. But basically the moment you put a screwdriver in it, it just started chipping away. And this side was almost unrecognizable. Like, I know you can clearly see that I went to work on these, but there wasn't much to work with to start. And so basically what I had to do was focus. I had to create my own like seat for the standard screwdriver. So I took a drill and drilled down on each side until it opened up, and that worked pretty well on this one. It actually kind of looks like that's as is, but if you know the actual size of jets, you know that is way down in the threads, which you can see there. The entire top was just smoothed out. You can look at this one compared to it. So it's almost like a millimeter shave down. And then this one was just beyond a pain. Like, I got all the way to the bottom, and I had to put a small screwdriver in that. And basically, I just took a long ratchet. All about the leverage. But that's what I've been dealing with. I'm actually going to make this video in a couple different parts, because I have the parts that I'm getting tomorrow, but that's not gonna show up for you guys, because next scene is you'll see me throwing in the parts that I just got. I'll go over some other tips. All right, so the parts are in, so I'm going to go ahead and jump to that here in a bit. I did want to show you one more thing that I found online, and honestly, I highly encourage you to look into it, because obviously this chart is pretty great, it's pretty helpful, but apparently the book used to come with this chart, which I think is a lot more helpful. And I know it's turning out pink. My printer didn't know what to do with the image. You could find this online. I really just wanted to give you an idea of what it generally looks like, so when you find it yourself, you know you're on the right track. So the beauty about this is, rather than just saying, like on this chart, it just tells you how to get back to, you know, what you came with. And, you know, a lot of this, I'm not going to pretend like it isn't, is trial and error. And so that's honestly why you're going to have a harder time finding anyone, you know, nailing down something specific that you need to do with your carburetor, because, you know, it really depends on your vehicle. But this gives a lot more information to kind of help ease you into that, so you're not just throwing a bunch of random jets and you don't have to buy that pack like I was talking about. And maybe it's helpful to have around, but again, you know, at most you're going to be going up and down a few different levels of jets. You don't need, you know, 15 different sizes, I would imagine. So what this chart does, just to go over it super briefly, is you start at 1. That is what your regular out-of-the-box carburetor is going to be set at. That's going to have your jet sizes, your metering rods, and all that. What you do from there is, here on the side, there's cruise mode and power mode. So if you're looking to increase your power, you want to get more out of your vehicle, it's not necessarily your daily driver, you don't mind spending the extra money on the gas, then you can go down along this chart path to get to your next like your next sizes, and it'll tell you, and I'll show you that in a second. And then the other side is obviously cruise mode. You want to make it a little bit more cruisability, or increase the cruisability, then that's what you do. So this shaded area is what you really want to stay in. And again, I mean, your vehicle might handle these outliers really well, and you can go ahead and do that, but that's typically what they recommend, is you just stay in this kind of cruising zone, so you're not sacrificing too much of your cruisability for your power, you know, if you were to be down here. So let's say that you want to go, you know, add the power a little bit. You're going to go along this line, and then you want to continue your cruisability, so you want to go to 9. So, and the black and the white shading doesn't matter, and I'll show you why here in a second. But you just go to reference number 9, and then that's going to give you your main jet size, which is the 0.100, which is actually the same as what you started with. And then you're going to go to your metering rod, and that's going to be that's going to be this 6.8 by 42, so it's a little different, right? Smaller metering rod means it's a little bit more open, get more out of the jets. And then you go down here, and I had to fill it in because it got super washed out, but you moved along the line, so now you're closer to stage 1. And once you go to stage 1, then you're going to increase your secondary to 0.098. So you just follow the chart, you find the box that you want. You know, I'll make a really straightforward one. Let's say you go to 10. So you go to 10, that's right on the line, so there's no guessing whether or not you're stage 1, 0, or 2. That is very much on the 2 line. And so you'd go to stage 2, which is right there, 0.101 for secondary metering, reference 10. There you go. There's your jet sizes, your metering rod size, and what have you. So the only reason it's filled in black and white is because this came from like a pack that you'd buy, so a jet pack, and the black dots are the ones that come with your kit. The white dots are the ones where you'd need to buy different metering rods or different jet sizes. So in this case, because you're just looking to find the exact jet size that you want, the exact metering rod size, it doesn't really matter if it's black or white at this point, because you just go out and buy that. But that's a super helpful document. I would encourage you to look it up. Obviously, it's going to be really hard for you to see through the video, but again, I just wanted you to see roughly what it looks like so you know when you find it, and you find it doing the 1405, you know what size carburetor you have, you go ahead and look that up. And this is out of a document, so there you go. So let's go ahead and dive in now that we've seen the 3 documents I think are most important to you while you're figuring out everything on your carburetor. So let's dive into some of the parts I got. Alright, so here we go. So I got my jets, and like I said, I was able to buy them as their own little packs. I didn't have to get the $70 expansion pack or whatever, DLC, whatever you want to call it. And so you get 2. These are like $8 or $9. So maybe in the long run it's worth buying the whole big pack. I would say if I had, tons of carbureted vehicles that I had to change the jets on, maybe it's worth it, but I just wanted to get on the road with these. I got the spring pack. You can buy these from other stores and technically get it for cheaper, and you could probably look up the spring rate, but it's just so much easier with Edelbrock because they color code it, and so they say you need the orange spring for this and the pink spring for that. It's just a lot easier just to have this. So I was definitely willing to spend the extra $1 or $2 because this was only $10 to get the right stuff. Vacuum caps, super important. The one on the Quadrajets were cracked and dying and definitely leading to performance issues. And then I got my adapter plate. So as you heard me say multiple times, went from a Quadrajet to now I'm doing my Carter / Edelbrock. Now you're gonna need this 100%. You need this unless you're gonna change your intake manifold to do the kind of equal bore size an Edelbrock Performer, which I have somewhere around here. I'm just going to leave the original intake that was with the Quadrajet for now, but it's very important because the Quadrajet has different bore size holes like that. And so this is going to connect to my Quadrajet capable intake manifold, but it's going to work with this equal bore for my Edelbrock / Carter. So I've seen some people do it where they just have like the adapter plate, but then they have like all this open, and they definitely do not recommend that. Maybe it's just a ploy to sell some of these adapter plates, I don't know, but you can get performance with raising your carburetor. It's also a little better so you don't boil fluid like fuel. They don't suggest that you do it with a metal because obviously that'll just continue to, it's not going to dampen the heat at all, but I could put a rubber spacer between this and do it better, but I'll still benefit from the performance issues of raising it up a little bit. So either way, it's a win. So I bought it. Eventually I'll replace my intake manifold with an Edelbrock Performer, and I won't need this, but definitely need it to start. So those are the parts I'm going to start hucking on. The only thing that really got annoying is I mentioned earlier in this video about the squirter and all of its fun to find. I actually got a message earlier today, because this is a different day than when I started earlier this video, and they refunded me because they no longer have the part. So the chase is back on. I'm going to put a little bit more effort into trying to find N28 exactly, but if not, like I said, Jegs sells them as well. And then my metering rods haven't showed up yet. But that is basically the bulk of the video, giving you some extra details on how to get this to spec, where to look for items, and what helpful documents really make it easy. So if you get one of these junkyard or swap meet Carter carburetors, or even an earlier Edelbrock, or even just an Edelbrock in general, and you want to get it back to spec, the information is out there. It's just a little bit harder to find, so I wanted to make a video that kind of consolidated a lot of what I was finding. Last tip to send you off with is make sure when you're putting the cap back on to take out the metering rods and just put the metering rods and all that in afterwards. That way you're not going to bend these. What I'll do real quick at the end of this is I'm not really going to have a reason to do a quadrajet video, so if you are interested, the last couple of minutes of this is just going to be me showing you what the inside of a quadrajet looks like out of your own pure curiosity. So feel free to stick around for that. Alright, here is a quadrajet, nicknamed the Q-Jet. So you're going to find these on a lot of older vehicles. I know I see a lot of people throwing these away. Like I said, I mean, there's probably tons of people that thoroughly enjoy the quadrajet, and there's definitely value to it if you have one of those numbers matching cars with low miles. There's definitely value to having the original quadrajet on it. So not knocking it in that case, it's just a little complicated, and I'll show you some of the uniqueness that lead me to call it complicated. So it's got an interior filter. Fuel line goes in through here. It's got a filter in here. So that's kind of unique. It has this, which I know looks a lot like it'd be an electric choke, but as you can see, there's no actual wires connected to it, and there weren't any that I removed. It's actually kind of like a heating coil inside. Again, I'm sure someone knows exactly how it works. It's probably really basic. I just haven't looked into it, but another part of the uniqueness there. It has a bunch of Phillips head screws. Some of these are different sized. I'm going to go ahead and start taking this apart. I know the really important thing is to not tighten these too much, just because of all the rods and stuff that you're about to see get really easily bent. So when I was first taking this apart, these were almost like finger loose. So probably doesn't need to be that loose, but just for that information. And of course, can't forget the 3 other screws, which have stars instead of Phillips. So here we go for that. And also can't forget the 2 in here. Then of course you have to push the dowel pin out, pull that away, and then I was really trying to skip this step because I mean, look how so close, but I need to take off this bracket right here so I could twist that, and then I should be able to get it all the way off. Almost there. And then of course, can't forget the screw right here connecting linkage. Try and take it off. Continue to film and not lose it. Ooh, so close. Boom. See what I'm talking about? Tons of stuff to bend if you over tighten it. But I mean, that is all I had to do to get this off. Technically, if you unscrew this, then I think you should be able to lift up and pull out these metering rods. So as far as on the track repair, that part isn't so bad. I was actually planning on making fun of it until I saw that piece, because again, this is like the 3rd time I've interacted with taking apart this quadrajet. But it seems like that would actually be fairly easy to do, and it is technically less screws than the Edelbrock, but still, if you want to get to any of these other important bits, like these metering rods, because I think that's just, yeah, that's just going to be for the primary. Ooh, that is interesting. Okay. Because like this whole part is such a pain to actually get to and get seated right. So I don't know if I'm actually going to take it out, but I'll show you. Like if you want to get to that stuff and you want to repair the float, which is right here in the middle, then you have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. You have 19 screws, a ton of linkage work and fiddling, as opposed to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 to get to literally everything. So perhaps that's why these slowly got replaced. But again, if you want to actually like work on this was really just in case you were curious. There's tons of videos, I'm sure, of Quadrajet specifically, but there you go. Thank you for watching.